Tonight, we are proud to welcome Quinn Jacobson, who is a friend of John and mine. He is here to talk about his work on Sun Mountain, and he will tell you more about that. He is an artist first in mixed media, encompassing photography and painting. He earned his master's in fine arts in interdisciplinary arts from Goddard College in Vermont in 2007. And he has been accepted into a PhD program in visionary practice and regenerative leadership in Southwestern College in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Welcome, Quinn.
Thanks for having me, everybody. I hope tonight you'll get something from my presentation. I think you Mexico border. I'm a full-time artist. I consider myself an existential artist. I'll talk a little bit more about that, what that means. And Christine mentioned that my primary medium is photography, but I do painting and writing. And I'm going to talk about my book tonight. It's called In the Shadow of Sun Mountain, The Psychology of Othering and the Origins of Evil. And I'll explain it to you what that means. My interests are existential art, mortality, and human behavior. So what I've done for the last many years of my life is I've concentrated on trying to understand human behavior. And I've used photography as a tool to explore those questions that I have, and explore what it really means to deal with the knowledge of your death, is what it comes down to. Christine mentioned my education there. This is a little CV here. I am scheduled to start a PhD program in Santa Fe here in New Mexico, but because of the changes within the Department of Education, I'm not sure if funding is going to be available for that, but we'll see. So what's the problem that I'm dealing with in my art? What I try to do is I try to begin with a thesis or a question and approach my art from that perspective. So we're all living human beings, and somewhere in our unconscious, outside of our conscious mind, we know that we're going to die. Some people are closer to death than others. Some people have scares with death, and some people have family members and friends who are dying, so death is on their mind more than not. But my question is, do creative people deal with this knowledge of death, or death anxiety is what it really is, any differently than people who don't exhibit or participate in creative things? And I want to talk just a little bit about that and how creativity, in fact, you in this camera club making photographs of whatever you make photographs of, birds or cherry trees or whatever you're doing, is an example of you buffering your mortality or awareness of mortality. And I'll talk to you psychologically about what that means. So the creative response is to make art and contribute to your culture, and your culture meaning the people around you, your community, whatever you're involved with. There's also a destructive response to the knowledge of your death too. People that are have these kind of destructive behaviors, seek to control others, they seek power, and they create conflict. And we see that in the world all the time, every day. So this core struggle of human existence, will we transform death anxiety, or the knowledge of our death, into creation or destruction? And my work examines how photography and art in general helps us choose creation over destruction. There was a very famous anthropologist in the 1970s. His name was Ernest Becker. He died in 1974. He wrote a book called The Denial of Death, which influenced me greatly. He won the Pulitzer Prize posthumously for that book. And what he explained, his theories explained that the knowledge of our mortality, the knowledge that we're going to die, is the mainspring of human activity. It drives so much of what we do. And what I've been exploring is the creative side. What is creativity? Where does creativity come in to that, come into play with the knowledge of our death, like I said? And creativity quells anxiety. It quiets the dread. In other words, if anybody's ever experienced anxiety, and I know I have definitely, what I can do is I can engage in a creative process, and it just makes something. It doesn't matter if I'm painting or if I'm writing or if I'm making photographs. Once I'm engaged in that creative process, it quells the anxiety. And Becker's theory is that this anxiety, wherever you think it might come from, where it's coming from is outside of your consciousness, is the knowledge that you're going to die someday. And we never know when, we never know how, but it's always lurking in the back of our minds. It's the biggest question in philosophy, right? Is what is death? What is consciousness and what is death? But when we make photographs or art, we're doing something powerful. We're trying to leave a mark that lasts beyond our lifetime. Becker called this immortality projects. So when we make photographs, when we make artwork, what we're doing is we're outside of our consciously, subconsciously, what we're doing is we're engaging in this symbolic immortality process. We're leaving something behind. So our greatest fear is the impermanence and insignificance. That's what scares us the most, psychologically speaking. So what we try to do is we try to engage in something that will leave something behind, a legacy. Children, putting your name on a building, amassing great fortune, writing a book, finding a great scientific breakthrough, whatever it is, we're driven mostly by the anxiety of not being here anymore. And so those immortality projects, creativity plays a huge role in that. But there's a dark side too. Some people respond to death anxiety with destructive acts. This shows up in how we treat those who are different from us, what Becker calls othering. And this project, my new book, this book that I'm right now publishing, is called In the Shadow of Sun Mountain. Sun Mountain was a mountain I just moved here last year from the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. I lived in the mountains of the Rocky Mountains for 4 years in central western Colorado, where the Ute, or the Tabawatch band of the Ute Native Americans lived. They traveled the land that I had, they hunted and fished on, and they traveled there every summer. And they lived on that property. And in that area is some people, the white man named it Pikes Peak. It's right outside of Colorado Springs. The Native American name, or the Tabawatch Ute name for that, is Sun Mountain. It's a very special mountain form. It's over 14,000 feet high. It's where the sun first hits when it comes up. And I lived just to the west of that. It was to the east of me. So all of the photographs that I made were in the shadow of Sun Mountain. That's why I called the book that. And the idea behind my work in this project is that I'm using the extermination and basically the form of genocide when the white settlers and the military came through and wiped the Tabawatch Ute out of Colorado. They're still there. They're in tiny numbers, but they took their land, they took their language, they took their religion and spirituality and all that stuff. They stripped it from them. And what my project deals with is the questions around that. Why do people do this? Why do people commit genocide? Why do people other people? Why do we do this to people who are different from us? And that's what this whole project is about. Becker calls it othering. You may have heard this word before, where marginalized communities, we other people, they're the other, in groups and out groups. This fascinates me. Human behavior is what's driven my work for decades. And so through my journey as a photographer and artist, I've discovered that facing our mortality through creative work can transform fear into beauty. My book looks at how art can help us choose creation over destruction when confronting life's biggest mystery, our own impermanence or our death. And this is the cover of the book, the back and front cover of the book. What you're going to see, I'm going to present a few photographs from the book, and I'll talk a little bit about each photograph, and if you have any questions about them, I can answer them. So the concept behind the project. I love this Fernando Pessoa quote: "Art gives us the illusion of liberation from the sordid business of being." I love that quote. Exploring how photography and art confronts the hidden psychological forces that shape human behavior is a big driver for this project. It's an artistic and philosophical examination of how denial of death fuels fear, othering, and violence. And it addresses how human beings cope with the awareness of our death. Most of the work that I made centers around medicinal plants, ceremonial plants, objects, and symbols. And most of these, all of them, were made in the shadow of Sun Mountain. And I photographed these raw. This is a Palladio-type print. This is a palladium print from a wet collodion negative. I worked mostly in whole plate, which is 6.5 by 8.5 inch glass negatives. And again, this process, the wet collodion process, was the main process, the photographic process during this time period. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to give...
Hey, Quinn, quick question.
Yes,
a lot
please.
of people, John and I will understand what you're talking about, but a lot of our members don't know what these processes are. Can you give just a brief description of each of the processes?
Sure. Okay, so this first process that this image you're looking at here comes from a wet collodion negative. Wet collodion images are, it was invented around 1851 is when it was made public. The wet collodion process is a process of pouring a salted collodion on a piece of glass, sensitizing it in a silver bath, exposing it in a camera, and then using a basic iron developer to develop it and a fix to fix it. And then you varnish it afterwards for protection. But this process, you most likely recognize images from this process of the American Civil War. And probably one of the most recognizable images is if you have a $5 US dollar bill, you'll see Abraham Lincoln's image on there. That original image is a wet collodion photograph. So American Civil War photographs, Lincoln. Processes before this were the daguerreotype and even the paper negative way early on. And processes after this would be like dry gelatin plates and then on into plastic film and so forth as we move into the 20th century. But this wet collodion process, I heard Christine mention that you'll see a demonstration from John on this. This has been the driver of my work, primarily because one of my big ideas, if you will, is I've married the time period with the cultural aspects of what I'm talking about here, specifically with the Native Americans of Colorado. So, and the process gives such a, I use vintage lenses, lenses from the 1860s and 70s. I usually shoot them wide open. The apertures, they're very fast lenses. They're usually portrait lenses, so they're very fast. So I shoot them wide open. It gives this dreamy, swirly look, this kind of surreal feeling in the image. And then I print them on with palladium, or usually platinum palladium. I've done cyanotypes. I've done all kinds of printing out processes. And these processes are where you coat a piece of paper with a chemical, let it dry, put the negative on the paper, expose it to the sun, and then develop the image. And that's what these are. So you see the brush strokes and everything. I wanted it to feel real and raw. And as we go through some of these, you'll see what I mean. There's the Ute Lodge image, kind of full blown. Again, I photographed it full. I love this feeling of realness, of authenticity. So you can see my stamp in the corner. You see my handwriting. HPRO, that means it's on Hahnemühle paper, a rolled paper, a Hahnemühle. What it is a palladiotite, the title of it and the date of it. So the role of photography is more than documentation. It reveals the subconscious structures of history, unlike what I was just talking about there. I use the 19th century processes to evoke historical continuity and mortality awareness. Images of landscapes, plants, and objects serve as psychological and historical symbols. So I didn't photograph human beings in this for a reason, and I'll try to explain why, but the main driver behind this is to show both living and dead plants that they use, medicinal and ceremonial plants, some of the symbols they use, and then the landscapes. So this is another, this is a palladiottype again from a wet collodion negative. This is I call this sacred trees. It's a little tiny pine tree, ponderosa pine tree, coming up through this granite and this bright eastern light that just popped up over Sun Mountain here. This is early in the morning when I made this negative. I think I have a little better view of it. There it is. And you can see this surreal feeling, all the artifacts in it and all the, just this feeling of, it's emotional to me as it's standing there alone on the granite, growing out of this volcanic rock, and the lights from just over Sun Mountain starting to shine on it. So the influence, I talked a little bit about Becker's book, The Denial of Death. He explains how we repress this death awareness and what it does to us. And then also another very influential book for me was The Worm at the Core, and on the role of death in life. Now, a lot of people think talking about death is a real downer, right? It's depressing and nobody wants to talk about it. But after studying these theories for years and really grappling with these ideas for decades in my creative work, what I found is being aware that I can die at any time, any moment, and keeping that alive in my mind, I tend to appreciate things more. I tend to appreciate every day, the little things in life, the nice warm sun on my face, or the nice breeze blowing, or something beautiful that I see. I tend to, it's really a positive thing. So when we repress this and we shove it away and we do everything in our power to distract us from thinking about it, it can come as a real burden in the long run not to acknowledge us. There's some Eastern religions that actually meditate on their mortality every morning. They get up and they think about their death, and it makes them more aware. There's a writer, a Scottish writer named Alexander Smith. He says, to die makes us, the knowledge of our death makes us human. And I think what he meant by that is exactly that. To be aware of death makes you more appreciative, gratitude, humility, and awe. That's what it's really done for me. And The Worm at the Core, I've had two of the authors on my YouTube show. I've interviewed two of these authors, Sheldon Solomon, I've had on a couple of times on my YouTube channel, and I've had Jeff Greenberg on once. And they wrote this book called Worm at the Core that deals with the terror management theory. And what they've done is they've taken Becker's theories and they've produced clinical data that shows that they're true, that's real, that what the fear of our death does to human behavior in everyday life, and how we repress it, and the bad things it can do, like, groups of people committing genocide to buffer their own death anxiety, like the project on the Native Americans in Colorado. and the good things that you can do with it as well too. The in-groups are more supportive of one another. They'll come together, things like that. But that was those two books are the driving force, psychologically speaking, the underpinnings of my work in this book that I've made. So the Tabawatch Ute and the land's memory. So this land, the land that I lived on, was once the sacred home of the Tabawatch Ute, people of Sun Mountain is what they're called. Their history was erased through colonization, driven in part by death denial and terror management. My work seeks to reconnect the land with its past and expose the underlying forces that led to their displacement. That's the best way I can put it. That's what this is about. So the images that I've made support these ideas and also have a big technical element like I talked about, the wet collodion process, some of these old printing out processes, the aesthetics, the look and feel of the work support those ideas. 3 Aspens. I just recently read on my YouTube channel, I read the writing that I have with this image in my book. The 3 Aspens standing like sentinels and scarred and weathered, like, you know, their bark talking about like ancient writing on stone and standing like sentinels, and just the presence of these trees and stones and things that you really start to see in a different light as you meditate on what's going on, or what went on that land, and standing on that ground of where these things took place. How art confronts mortality. Art is a response to the existential problem of impermanence. So again, knowing that we're not going to be here forever and dealing with that and not allowing it to disrupt our lives in a very bad way or a malignant way. Otto Rank and Ernest Becker saw creativity as a way to achieve symbolic immortality. And that's what I'm doing. I'm fully aware of my goals of making work. While I find it buffers my anxiety and calms me down and puts me in this kind of state of flow when I'm making work and gets me out of the world and gets me away from things, I also am very, very well aware that a lot of my photographs and a lot of my publications will be here long after I'm gone. And I'm aware of that. Even though I may not say it consciously, I am aware of it. And that symbolic immortality is very, very important to us. It reassures us that life has meaning, that we're significant, and that we don't have that dread, that constant anxiety. I mean, you never ever get rid of it. There's no way around this. We're going to die. We're not going to exist anymore. In a few generations, we'll be forgotten. Eventually, everything will go away. I mean, we're just not going to get out of it. But for the short term, and to be an asset, not a liability in this life, I think this is a good way to approach it, especially for creative people. My work embodies this struggle, merging historical narratives with contemporary and reflections on mortality. That image there, I'd walk the land constantly and I'd find these shed antlers, and I've made many. You saw the cover of my book is an image of shed antlers, but I've written a lot about these images and how they metaphorically support these theories and ideas. I also have a lot of paintings. I do painting in mixed media. So I call this Four Toes on the right. I talk about that too. On my YouTube channel, I just did a little presentation on pieces of my book. And I talk about Four Toes as painting and what it means and why I painted it. And on the left is a mullein leaf, a plant, a medicinal plant with a bullet hole in it. And it's planted in a Ute pot. This artist's name is El Posey. He's a Tabawatch Ute Native American potter. And I got one of his pots and I used it in a lot of the plants that I photographed. And so this mullein plant, this leaf with a hole in it, this plant can be used. They smoke it, make tea out of it for your lungs. It's a medicinal plant, and those are some kinds of the ideas that I was playing with. And I describe all of these in detail in the books. Photography as an act of witness. The camera doesn't just capture, it reveals. Photography forces us to see what we repress. Landscapes as silent witnesses. That's what I felt, I mean, overwhelmingly when I'd walk the land and I'd set up to make photographs. Landscapes as silent witnesses, artifacts as echoes of forgotten lives. These trees always felt like little kind of people or remnants of people, or, you know, they're living things. It was very profound for me to walk the land and find scenes that I'd want to photograph that looked very alien and very out of this world and very strange to me. Yet there was some echo of, you know, some kind of like silent witness, right? That's kind of what I was feeling. The act of making an image is an act of confrontation, facing history, mortality, as well as myself. What does your photography make you confront? And if you've never thought about that, you should. Here's a medicine wheel image that I made on a big granite stone. The bigger question is, what illusions shape your world? How does the denial of death influence history and human behavior? Can photography act as a tool for existential awareness and social change? Those are kind of, the last one anyway, is kind of a rhetorical question. Obviously, I believe it can and it should. There's something that I've been thinking about a lot is I look at artists and I look at artists' work and I read their statements, or I read why did they make that photograph or do that painting or drawing or that performance or wrote that story. It all tends to revolve around existence, existential concerns. What is it? What does it mean to be alive? What is meaning? What is purpose? Why am I here? What am I doing? You listen to music. All those things are always swirling around somewhere in the art. And I challenge you, the next time you hear a piece of music or look at a photograph or read a piece of poetry or whatever you do, any form of art, watch a dance performance, think about what that means existentially. What questions are they asking? What ideas are they addressing? And I think you're going to find in sometimes very obvious and very out front and sometimes very subtle, you're going to find they're dealing with existential concerns. The concern of living and dying and what that means, what we do in this dash, right? The date you were born and the date you die, that dash. What you do in that dash time and what does it mean? Another process that I worked in a lot was the RA4 color reversal direct positive print. I know that sounds like a lot. What this is I take color paper, you know, the stuff that you get at your photo mat that you have your 35 millimeter film. You used to get that printed out on the Fuji crystal paper or whatever. I use the color photo paper. I cut it the size of my camera. I have a large 10 by 10 view camera. Cut a big 10-inch by 10-inch square piece of paper. I put it between, I put it in the back of the camera and the plate holder. I put a filter system to filter the color, and I use an old lens, and I photograph these plants or stones or symbols or landscapes. And then I process it in black and white developer, and I process it in RA4 color developer and Blix. And this is what it produces. It produces some very beautiful color, off-color, surreal images. So I know my presentation isn't very long, but it's probably long enough for most of you. We're always gnawing at the bone of death, whether we're aware of it or not, and most of us aren't. Most of us don't. Hey, what are you talking? I don't think about my. Good, you don't. You probably don't. And that's the way, evolutionarily, psychologically speaking, we develop these mechanisms to repress that. Because if you thought about it all the time, you'd be balled up in the corner and you wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning. So that's a good thing, because what you're doing is you're distracting yourself every day with a job or a family or hobbies or this or that or whatever you're doing, right? We're always all distracted, so we never have time to think about this until it rears its ugly head. Oh my God, I have a little bump on my neck, or I'm not, this or that, or whatever it is, right? Something wakes us up, and all of a sudden we're in panic mode. My idea is if you're a creative person, you should be contemplating this more, not to be grotesque or morbid, like I said, but you should be thinking about it from the creative perspective and what creativity does for you in light of that. It alleviates and it buffers that death anxiety or terror management, basically, is what it is. So this project is an invitation to reflect, to see beyond the surface, and to question how we construct meaning in the shadow of mortality. That's what I really want my message to get across is you need to think about these things. And as a creative person, you need to contemplate how your creativity plays in to the buffering of your death anxiety. And what you'll find if you spend just a little bit of time, you don't need to be an expert on this, what you'll find is that creativity, again, you do this to quell that anxiety. It's the flip side of anxiety. Creativity will just damper it down. Better than drugs, better than alcohol, better than anything. You'll find that creativity, and probably most of you already do, or you wouldn't be making photographs, right? You'll find that it quells that anxiety. It gives you something, you get a break from those existential concerns and those existential struggles. And that's really my main message. I know it's basic, but it's what I've been contemplating for many years. And I've written 360 pages in the book, so I have a lot more to say about it than what I'm just presenting here. But here's another RA4 RA4 color direct reversal color print. Again, these are 10 by 10 prints. And I've just tried to, with the color work, I've tried to bring more existential concerns, right? Skulls don't wear hats and things like this. Hat was actually black, believe it or not, but the transformation of color and the surreal. I use this old Petzval portrait lens on this. It just, it gives a lot of depth and creativity in my mind to it. So that's my presentation. If you have anything you'd like to ask or anything you want to address, I'd be happy to try to answer the questions.
Any questions?
Or comments, either one, I'm fine.
With the few outdoor scenery pictures that you displayed, they were all in black and white. Do you try some of them in color and just compare the two and see what works, or do you prefer the landscapes to be in black and white?
Yeah, I do have several landscapes in color that I've done. I think I understand what you're asking, and it's a fair question. My main concern is not so much based on the aesthetic of the image, although I'm concerned with that. I'm more concerned with the mood of the image. So, in other words, if we talk about aesthetics, if we're going to talk about something, oh, that's pretty, or that's, oh, that's wonderful, there is some concern for that. But my main concern is the mood. What kind of feeling does the image give beyond just the aesthetic, beyond just the beauty of it, or beyond just the quality of it, if you will? So I have done landscapes in color, and I do have some of those in my book, of course, but these particular landscapes were in service to the idea of the 19th century, of the time period that these events were taking place on that particular piece of ground in that particular location. And so I was more concerned with the mood or the feeling of the image. So that's why I chose to do the old process and use the palladium printing or platinum palladium. I've done a lot of too as well. But that's why I've made those aesthetic or choices on the processes that I use.
In 2 weeks, when John does his presentation, you'll see how the wet plate collodion plates were made. He'll be making a tin type, but it's the exact same process. It's just on metal versus a piece of glass. but Quinn makes negatives.
Yeah.
So it's a slightly different process, but in the end, it's the same idea.
Exactly. Yes, that's a good point. And the reason I make negatives is for diversity. So when I can take, you make a tintype or an ambrotype, like Christine just said, a tintype's on metal, an ambrotype would be on glass, but it's still a positive. I make a negative and it's on glass, but it gives me the density so I can print on different types of paper and different processes. So if I'm looking for a specific aesthetic or a specific feeling or a specific mood that I want to convey. So I look at each photograph as a paragraph of writing or a page of writing. I look at it in terms of what does it say, how is it saying what it's saying, and is it saying what I want it to say? Am I achieving through composition, through choice of optics, through choice of process, through like the question that was just asked, the choice of color, black and white, particular whatever it is. That's my main concern, is conveying the ideas that I'm working with, the theories that I'm working with, the questions that I'm working with. Every single image that I make is in service to answering something about or addressing something about the questions that I'm asking. That's my biggest concern. So I hate to say it, but I'm not really out to make pretty pictures. I'm not out to make postcards or commercial. That's probably the better term. I'm not interested in commercial work. This is about a deeply personal exploration of questions and concerns and interests that I have in addressing as a visual artist, addressing those questions and concerns. So my photographs don't serve any commercial purpose. They serve existential and fine art questions or concerns. Yeah.
This question might be a little bit trivial at first, but so you're trying to promote a certain type of feeling whenever the viewer looks at the image, and with print, that's a whole other type of process, because the type of the paper you're using oftentimes determines whether you're really able to get that effect across to the viewer. So how do you translate that into a book, a 300-page book, where you have to make economic decisions about the paper that is going to have the right vehicle to carry your message across without being costing $6,000 per book, if you know what I'm saying?
I do. No, it's not trivial. That's a good question, actually. I'm in the midst of that right now. Very good question. So most artists are concerned, especially visual artists, photographic artists or painters or whatever you do. Most of them are concerned with the exact comments that you just made or questions you just asked, is how do you spend so much time in selecting a paper to print on, a process, a toning process, a textural quality, a feel of, holding an image in your hand as an original image versus looking at one in a book. How do you translate that over? And it's a very good question. And I'm dealing with that right now. And I've had 3 books printed so far of this particular publication. And I've tested different papers in different printing places. And right now, talk about trivial, but right now I'm on 100-pound paper in an American company that has a beautiful spot-on color replication printing process. And on the 100-pound paper, I'm getting copies of the original so close that I'll never get the texture, the feel of that in there, but the mood is conveyed as close as I can get. And it'll never be perfect. You'd have to stand in front of my photographs to look at them to see the originals, obviously. So the closest I can get is what I'm doing now. And that's technically, that's what I've done. And you're right, the cost is astronomical. I could have what I'm doing right now, I could have gone to China and farmed it out to China and probably had it done for a third of the cost that I'm paying to do them now. But this American company is great to work with. I'd prefer to keep it here in this country, print it in this country, and have the quality that I want in the book. And that's a big concern for me, though. But that's as close as I can get. Will it be perfect? No. But I think the supporting writing, the supporting text, and the ideas with the work, and as long as my paintings are color correct, my photographs are color correct, because I do have cyanotypes, I have photogenic drawings, I have various pot print processes in there, various tone processes, iron-based processes. So all of these have subtle different tonalities, reds and browns, and things that I'm really concerned with that are important to have to convey these ideas. That's the closest I can do is what I'm doing now, and I'm actually quite happy with it, to be honest with you. Good question.
So thank you very much. It was really interesting. And my question is, what came first, if anything? In other words, did your photographic techniques and approach make you realize that I could use this to explore the mood and the subject matter that you shared with us? Or was it your interest in the subject matter and wanting to be able to capture that which led you to conquer these photographic approaches?
Great question. That's a really good question. Thank you. If you were in the alternative photographic space, you'd probably at least know my name, at least in wet collodion, because I published several books on the wet collodion process. And you'd probably know that I've always preached, because I've been making art for over 30 years. I've always preached to have some plan, some idea of what you want to make work about. But in reference to your question, the arc of my creative life started with making this work without knowing what I was doing. So I used these processes because they were moving to me. They did something inside of me. It wasn't just a straight photograph, and it wasn't what I'd seen in undergraduate school and graduate school and all these things that I'd experienced. I was a combat photographer in the military. I worked with straight photography for many, many years. And it wasn't that I was tired of straight photography, but these processes opened up something new. They were more poetic. They were more lyrical. They were more expressive to me. And so something inside was moved by them. Now, to go to your question, chicken or the egg, I don't know how to answer that, but I know that I started using the processes before I understood why I was using the processes. So I put the theories to the concept, to the craft. I put the concept to the craft after I was already working in the craft. And so sometimes I stopped telling people to not make photographs or not do paintings or not do some creative process. First have an idea. No, you don't need to. Just go make something, see what happens. Our subconscious can reveal so much of what we can't consciously or internally, express, that sometimes, if you're a visual artist, especially, sometimes just making photographs or doing a painting or a drawing, or even if you're a writer, writing some things out, all of a sudden you start understanding something deeper or some ideas that you have that you couldn't express any other way. And that's what happened to this. I write in my book, literally, there's a big section, chapter 2, actually chapter 3 is called a phenomenological autobiography. And phenomenology is lived experience. And in that biography, it's extensive. I talk about my entire creative journey. And what I realize now at 61 years old and looking back, starting in my 20s, making work, what I see as I look back is I had these longings, I had these questions, and I had these concerns. but I couldn't put words to them. I didn't know there were psychological theories or ideas about them out there. I didn't know anything about that. And yet I was making this work, and I have for over 30 years, about these ideas. And it wasn't until, you know, I ran into Ernest Becker's book and I read The Denial of Death, that I literally had an epiphany, like a Rosetta Stone moment. And I understood what I was doing, why I was doing it. And it was just an incredible, I don't even know how to explain how enlightening that was to me creatively, and what I was doing for all those decades, and not really beating around the bush, kind of tapping around it. I'll give you one quick example, and I write about this extensively in the book. In 1993, I graduated with an undergraduate degree in photography, communication, and visual art. And I had to do it was called a Bachelor of Integrated Studies, and it had a capstone project to it, meaning you had to do this big kind of piece of something. And I decided to do an exhibition, a photographic exhibition. And what I made were color Polaroid photographs. And I was very influenced by a photographer named Lucas Samaras in the 1970s. He did these manipulated Polaroids. He'd take a pickle fork, the Polaroid would come out and start developing, and take a pickle fork and move the chemistry around. And so I started doing that. I did self-portraits. I did photographs of all kinds of things in my culture that moved me or disturbed me or whatever. And then I transferred these images onto cotton and linen paper, and they were about 6 inches square is what they ended up being, maybe 8 inches. Some of them were bigger, smaller, but anyway. So keep in mind, this was 33 years ago. The name, and I still have the statement from that exhibition. The name of that exhibition was Visions in Mortality. And the statement that I wrote was about life being mostly difficult, hard, with these little tiny blips of beauty and awe and things like that. And I didn't know any of these philosophers. I didn't know about death anxiety. I didn't know about the denial of death. I didn't know any of the psychology behind it. But there it was, rearing its head up and showing me that what I was doing was what I'm most preoccupied with, what I'm most interested in: human behavior, why we do the things we do when we do them, and specifically why we treat people who are different from us so poorly so much of the time, right? I'll dislike you because the color of your shirt or the size of your nose, right? It just pick something out. It seems we have to constantly have this designated group of inferiors, right? And this has always puzzled me. I've always been curious why, from a spat with your neighbor over somebody on your lawn or fence or a tree growing over, to global wars and genocide. Why are we always in conflict? That's been my main concern. So the long answer around is the concepts. The concepts came after the processes. The processes grabbed me, moved me, and I knew there was something there, and I stuck with them, and I kind of mastered them, and I got control of them, and I can do anything I want with them, and I can create what I want with, kind of like a brush in my hand. If I want to paint something, if I want to write something, I took control of those processes and in service of these ideas. So that's a great question. I appreciate you asking that.
You've settled on using Native American objects and places in order to help. Now, I'm curious about your journey to that, because there are other people that are doing the same journey that you are, but they are using more ordinary day-to-day places and experiences in the human experience rather than that. I'm just curious. I mean, I know the answer in my own head, just looking at these things, because the way I react to it. I'm just curious what drove you in that direction.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question as well. Why did I select Native Americans? This is a very, very touchy topic for me, because I was born in the West. I live in the West. I've lived in the East as well too, but this is my home. Native Americans are trivialized a lot here. So if you go to Santa Fe or Taos here in this state that I live in, you're going to see the Indian pictures. You're going to see the headdresses. You're going to see, they're somewhat exploited. So it's a very, very touchy topic. How I arrived at this point is that I lived in Germany for 5 years, and I taught photography all over Europe. I lived in Germany, and I did a large project. I had an exhibition in Paris called Glass Memories. Part of that project was a grouping of work that's called, if you speak German, as somebody in Maryland there, I'm sure, Vergangenheitsbewältigung, coming to terms with the past is what that big compound German word means. And that's what I called it. And at first I thought I was making photographs in service of, having Germans come to terms with their past. In the end, it was me coming to terms with my past. So in graduate school, I had my DNA tested, and family lore kind of played out. And my father's line is Jewish. I have a haplogroup, a male haplogroup that's Jewish. And I have, on my mother's side, I have 5% Native American in me. So I have this kind of weird combination of genocidal heritage. And so that really got me thinking about genetic memory and how am I being influenced by that without even knowing it? Who knows? I don't know. But how I came to settle on working in the Native American space is I purchased 12 acres of land in central Colorado, right in Ute country. I lived on top of a mesa on a mountain. The Ute, the Tabawatch, there was 11 bands of Ute in that area, and one of the bands with Tabawatch came through that area in the summertime and hunted and fished in that area where I lived. And as I stood on that land, and I was well aware of where I was standing and what I was dealing with and what I was interfacing with, that I was just moved powerfully by addressing, like, why did this happen, right? Same with the Holocaust, same with what happened in Europe, the Shoah, same with all of this stuff. Why does this happen? So I used the Tabawatch Ute metaphor, although very true, very real, all the plants, all the medicinal plants, all the symbolism, everything, all very real. But that's just one idea that played out in factual history. But this plays out every single day, right? With the spat with your neighbor to global wars. These ideas are real. And I know Becker talked about this in his book. He said, man, if political leaders would just read this and understand this, we could have a very different world. We could have a very, very different world. It's changed my life. It's changed how, when people respond to me in a negative way. I was at a post office not long ago, and the lady was getting irate with me. My wife put something on a package that she cut out, like first class or something. She was starting to threaten me about, that's a felony. You can't do that. The post office, you could go to jail for that. And I realized at that moment she was acting out through her terror management system, through the psychological, what Becker laid out clearly in his book, how we react, why we want to take authority and we want to put somebody down and put them in their place. That kind of thing happens to us all the time. Now I'm very aware when people come, I don't have those kinds of interactions very often, but when they do happen, I don't lose my cool. I don't fight back. I know exactly what's happening psychologically. And I choose to act differently because I'm aware of this knowledge. I'm aware of human behavior. And through art, I use it, my creativity, I use it specifically to buffer my own existential dread and my own existential struggles. But I've also used these theories to improve my life, to understand other human beings better, to understand difference better, to understand that I don't need to be threatened by somebody being upset with me or trying to put me in my place when they're not happy with me. I understand that, all that psychologically. So I see it as something that's very positive, and it's changed my life in a very positive way. Just the understanding of this, and through art and creativity, and I hope this book, one of the things I'm doing, when people buy one of these books, they buy one, I'll sign it, I'll personalize it for them, and then I'm going to take another book and I'm going to send it to an institution of their choice. If they want it to go to a library, their alma mater college, or a university library, a college library, I want to get as many books in these libraries and universities and places where people can read about these theories, especially creative people, and understand how they can leverage these theories and ideas, not only in their own personal work, but in their lives in general. So that's how I came to choose the Native American angle. But it's just one story. You can use, like you alluded to this, you can use many, many different stories, daily lives. It doesn't have to be a historical event. It can be daily interactions you see every day that's happening in the world today. So that's it. Thanks for that question. It's a good question.
Anyone else?
I suggest you send it to the Library of Congress.
You know, thank you for that. I do have that on my list. I have a list of places that I'm going to submit these books to, and there's also a Ute museum in Montrose, Colorado that I'll be sending it to as well too. My website is studioq.com. If anybody has any ideas and you're interested in sharing, or you're interested in this, please get a hold of me. I'd love to interact, because I'm not doing this for profit. I don't need the money. I don't need to make money. I'm trying to cover printing costs and some shipping costs. That's all I want to do. These ideas are so important to me, and I love the work. I spent 5 years, almost, this will be going on actually 4.5 years on this book, the work and the writing. And so this is a labor. This is my immortality project, right? This is a labor of love, and I really do honestly feel that this is the absolute most important work I've ever done in my life, and probably ever will do, to be honest with you. And I just want people, for those interested in it, I want people to understand that there is a better way to live, especially for creative people, and understanding why you're making work and the ideas behind the work, and more importantly, even the psychological impact you can have your work have, not only on yourself, but in your interactions with other people. And we're in such a pinch in the world today. I'm so concerned about what's going on. I'm sure a lot of you are too. And I worry about the interactions of human beings now, and why things have gone so poorly for so long. And not that I'm going to make a difference, but I feel like I need to try. So that's where this book is. And I appreciate the recommendation. They will get a copy of this for sure. I guarantee it.
Does anyone else have some question?
I'm interested in your reverse R4 process. So the paper you use is what would be traditionally used for color prints from a negative?
Yes,
so
sir.
Is there, the image is exposed directly on that paper? There's no image?
That's a direct positive. So I cut the paper, the color. This is a Fuji crystal paper, actually. I cut the paper in complete darkness, right, to fit I have a 10 by 10 inch large format camera. I put the paper in the holder. Then I expose the paper directly through the optic, through the lens of the subject matter that I'm photographing. I take the paper back in the darkroom, and in complete darkness, I process it in Dectal black and white paper developer. I fix it, I wash it, and then I process it in color, the color process, and blix it.
I'm just wondering why it doesn't look like it has a negative type appearance. It looks positive.
It's a direct positive, correct, exactly. There's a couple of reasons for that. If you, do we have time here? Let me see if I can show you something real quick. Do we have time? I think we do. Let me show you something. If I can do this, jump over here. I think you guys will find this fascinating. I hope you do. This image is actually in my book as well too, so you might find it valuable. Give me just 1 second here.
Good morning, good
What?
afternoon.
Got that. RA4. And if I go to,
This paper is RA4 color. So the series.
there it is. Okay.
Probably
70s, I was using a Cibachrome process which works from color
Yes.
slides to color
Yes.
positive, but this is different.
I did a lot of Cibachrome back in the day. Yeah. Let me mute the, well, I won't mute it, but okay. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to show you. It's only about 30, 40 seconds or something. Let me share my screen. That's shared, I hope. Is that shared? I hope.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Here we go. This is a shot that I had. Here we go.
I wanted to still isolate it here.
This is the color process after it's been developed in black and white. So there it is in black and white.
So this is a color direct positive made right in the camera. It's 10 inches by 10 inches and 25, about 25 centimeters square. I'm going to show you the development process here. That's kind of cool. Like everybody wants to see this stuff, how it works, what it does. Depending on the temperature, I'll go 1.5 to 3 minutes on this, just depends. This is my latest one for today. You'll see this posted later if you pay attention to my blog. I'll talk a little bit about this plant. And that is looking outstanding, beautiful. Obviously, the color is popping there. And since I live in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, I got some representative granite and some material there from rocks at the base of that. So there it is. I just wanted to share that with you. Next, it'll go into the Blix here and then a wash. And that's how I do my color direct positive prints.
So Quinn,
Yes.
is that directly the paper you took out that says not light sensitive anymore?
No, it's black.
After the black and white development
Oh,
and the stop bath.
That's not us, bud.
That's not us. That was very sensitive. I exposed it to bright.
sorry. I had my video playing in the background.
I was looking
No,
at my mixer and I'm like, where's that coming from?
Yeah, that's already been developed in Dectal black and white paper developer and fixed and washed. So it's not light. It's a little bit light sensitive, but it's ready to go in. Into the what? Here's the image in the book, the one that I just. It's probably terrible, isn't it? Yeah, it is. You can't see it really very well. God, where is it? Oh, darn it. Yeah, you can't see it very well. But there, that image. Can you see it back here? No. There's the image in the book that I just developed. Believe me, it looks good. But that's the proof copy of my book right there. So, but the RA Color 4 process was very important to me with this project because the beauty, the color meant so much to me on the mountain up there and what it represented. And I talk a lot about that, of course. And the wet collodion, the dry collodion, the photogenic drying processes, the cyanotypes, everything that I was using obviously isn't going to render color. And some of those processes render red and yellow black. So the RA4 process was very important for this project. And I probably have, God, I don't know, I probably have 30 or 40 of them in here, maybe 20 or 30 RA4 color pictures in here that are some of them are just really stunning and beautiful. But I'm biased, right? I made them, I love them. So, but look into that RA4 process if you're interested in doing that. It's very interesting and a lot of fun.
Do we have any other questions?
Quinn, I've got a quick one for you. In your last book, you were gracious enough to do a presentation for us. You had a photo in your Ghost Dance project, and it was a sunflower. And you then, carbonized that and put that in carbon for a carbon print process. Do you have any other nods to the actual land in any of your photos in this project?
That's a great question, John. You're so right. What I did is I took 3 dead sunflowers and I crushed them up. They were dead already. I photographed them, wet collodion, and I crushed them up and I carbonized them. I put them in a barbecue or in a can, and I made them ash, right? I made them charcoal. And in that charcoal, then I did what's called carbon printing. So I actually used like John's saying, I used the plant material in the photograph. And unfortunately, I didn't use any processes that use the plant material. But what I did do in lieu of that, and I think you'll appreciate this, I should have been prepared a little more prepared for this, but I think you'll appreciate this. What I did is I photographed a lot of them. I didn't really photograph them. I used contact prints. You know what I could do? Here, hold on. This will be easier. Sorry. Sun Mountain. What I did do is this. I used what's called photogenic drawings. Now we're going back, all the way back to Fox Talbot, right? The very first process, the 1834. So I'd take plants and I'd lay them on sensitized solid and silver paper, and then I'd expose them to the sun and I'd make prints like this. This is actually on vellum, waxed vellum paper, the medicinal plant on waxed vellum paper. So that's the closest that I got to doing what you just referred to. But that's where my journey started, John, was when I was doing the massacre sites and Ghost Dance in Colorado. I did a project called Ghost Dance, and I visited 2 massacre sites in Colorado, one called Sand Creek Massacre and one called Beecher Island Massacre. And I used those sunflowers from that site. And I have a couple of Ghost Dance photographs in here too, when I'm talking about all my projects too, that I use. But that's the closest that I came to that. But yeah, that's a great question. I did think about it, but I just wasn't using any processes and I didn't want to go into carbon printing because I was so involved. I used wet collodion, dry collodion, photogenic drawings, palladio-types, platinum palladium, cyanotypes, tone this, tone that, all of these different. And I was trying to limit it to things that served the interest of the final image. So, but that's the closest I came.
That makes sense. That's a gorgeous image.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's in the book.
For any of those who took my cyanotype class last year or who have made contact prints, it's pretty much the same idea. You lay the plant on top and flatten it down and then expose it. So that's pretty much what he was discussing here. Just as I know some of you have done that. That way gives you a better idea.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, because I know context is king, and I apologize if I'm speaking out of turn here, because if you don't know what I'm talking about and I'm acting like everybody does, we get in these bubbles, right? And we think, oh, I don't even think about what I'm saying. People are like, what are you talking about? Who are you? What are you saying there? I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And the text that I wrote with that particular plant and the photogenic drawing, that early 1830, that process came out of 1834. It was literally the first quote photographic process, even before the daguerreotype, really before the daguerreotype. But the text that I wrote about that is very compelling and moving to me. I talk about the shadow of itself and the shadow of our lives and how we transfer things, and it's just really moving. I've tried to, every photograph and every painting and every photogenic drawing or whatever I've done in the book, I've tried to include text that directly connects and ties ideas together, and much more than just it's a beautiful photographic book, but it's much more than that. My mind has gone into a place that goes beyond just pretty pictures, or interesting pictures. I love theory and concept, and I'm so deeply engaged with it that I don't want to miss, I don't want to miss, cut down the trees to see the forest, as they say.
Last quick question. The number on your T-shirt is backwards.
Isn't that great?
What's significant about 1851?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I appreciate you asking that. I wore this in honor of John and Christine. This is 1851 was when the wet collodion process was released for public consumption. It was published in The Chemist in 1851. And it's backwards because when you make an ambrotype or tintype that you're going to see from John, this will be reversed so it's right. It reads correctly. So everything's laterally reversed because it photographs a direct positive, just like the RA4 process.
You guys couldn't have set that up any better, could you?
One of our members, Kathy, wants to know if you've read all the books sitting behind you.
I have, actually, and even more than this. Actually, I love to read. I read a lot. I study a lot. My passion is I feel like the more I learn, the less I know. I realize how little I know. The more I read and the more I learn, but it feeds me. It gives me fodder. It gives me ideas, and I do love to read. I read the entire Worm of the Core on my YouTube channel, 11 chapters of it. That's one of the books that I don't think I could read The Denial of Death on my YouTube channel. I don't think I'd hold an audience for that one, but yes, I have. And some of them are my books too, not nearly all of them. Most of them are photo books and essays and writings about photography and art concepts and biographies and things like that. But yeah, most of them are a lot of psychology books too. But yeah, I have.
Is there any other questions for Quinn before we let him go? Okay, I believe that's all the questions. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Quinn.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Wonderful questions, and thank you for your attention. And I appreciate you inviting me. Anytime you want to have some weird guy come on and talk about all these psychological phenomenons in photography, let me know. I'm happy to do it. So I appreciate your time.
Quinn, thank you so much for being such a great friend to us and also the club. We hope your book does very, very well. Please send us information as soon as we can order that.
I'll do that. I think Christine's on my mailing list. I put her address on there, so you'll see when it comes out. It'll be a couple of months, and you'll see kind of my idea of sharing, buy one and share one kind of thing. That's my whole object. I'm just working out the final printing and what I've got a couple more books coming in to look at. So I'll do that. I appreciate it, John.
That's perfect. Thank you again so much. Christine, do you have anything for us before we head out?
No, just join us next week for our digital open contest, and we look forward to seeing you all then. Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.